The reflection in the polished silver platter was distorted, a monster's caricature. Alistair Finch saw his own sneer stretched wide as federal agents slammed his manicured hands onto the banquet table, scattering canapes and shattered champagne flutes. His $1,000 suit strained at the shoulders as they wrenched his arms behind his back. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the stunned silence of the grand ballroom. Across the room, through a sea of frozen, horrified faces, he saw her. The waitress? Clara. She stood not with a tray in her hands, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity, her eyes holding his. In them he saw not fear, not triumph, but a calm, devastating finality. It was the look of a chapter closing, a debt paid in full. And in that moment, Alistair knew his world had not just ended. It had been dismantled, piece by piece, by the one person he had never even seen. 6 months earlier, the world had been his. The velvet rope at the Empyrean dropped for him without a word. The maitre d' bowed like a supplicant. Alistair Finch owned the night, and everyone in it was merely set dressing. He sat at his usual table, a throne overlooking the glittering city, and snapped his fingers. Clara appeared instantly, her movements economical and precise. "Good evening, Mr. Finch. May I get you something to drink?" He didn't look at her. He was busy scrolling through his phone, his thumb flicking across images of yachts and properties. The 82 Petrus, and don't let the sommelier breathe on it for more than 5 minutes. Your kind tends to over-aerate. "Of course, sir," Clara said, her voice a placid lake. She returned with the wine, performing the ritual with a surgeon's steadiness. Alistair watched her reflection in the dark red liquid as she poured. He saw the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes, the worn but immaculate uniform. He saw weakness. "You're new," he stated, not asked. "I've been here for 3 months, sir." He finally lifted his eyes to her face. They were cold, assessing, like a butcher eyeing a cut of meat. "And in 3 months, you haven't learned to smile?" "I am focused on providing excellent service, sir." Alistair smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. He took a sip of the wine, swirled it, and then deliberately tipped the glass. Dark red liquid cascaded across the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto the floor. "Clumsy me," he said, his eyes locked on hers, daring her to react. "Clean that up." Clara didn't flinch. She simply retrieved a cloth and knelt, her movements graceful despite the humiliation of the act. As she dabbed at the pooling wine near his expensive leather shoes, something glinted at her neck. A simple silver locket on a delicate chain. Alistair's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his voice a low, venomous whisper. "What's that? A trinket from some lover who couldn't afford a real gift?" Clara paused, her hand freezing over the stain. "It was my husband's." "Was?" he purred, savoring the past tense. "Let me guess. He left you for someone who smiles." "He died," Clara said, her voice quiet but hard as diamond, "in service to his country." Alistair threw his head back and laughed, a short, ugly bark that made nearby diners shift uncomfortably. "Oh, a hero. Even better. Died for a flag while you're left cleaning up my messes. Tell me, does his ghost keep you warm at night, or do you just cry into that cheap pillow of yours?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and peeled off a single crumpled dollar bill. He tossed it onto the wine-soaked floor. It landed with a wet smack. "For your excellent service," he sneered. "Don't spend it all in one place, hero's wife." Clara stared at the soggy bill. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. She slowly rose to her feet, her face a mask of professional neutrality. But her eyes, for the first time, held a flicker of something else. It was a cold, calculating fire, an intelligence so deep and sharp it could have cut glass. She saw the way his expensive watch sat loosely on his wrist, the slight tremor in his left hand when he was angry, the almost imperceptible way his bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Russo, shifted his weight to his right foot, telegraphing a readiness to draw a weapon from a holster on his left hip. She catalogued it all. She filed it away. Alistair Finch, basking in his petty cruelty, was too arrogant to notice he wasn't just insulting a waitress. He was arming an analyst. Clara had not always worn a waitress's apron. Before the grief and the crushing medical bills for her younger sister, Chloe, she had worn a different kind of uniform. In a sound-proofed room deep within Fort Meade, she had stared at screens, not menus. She had dismantled complex data streams, not tables. She had hunted predators of a different kind, terrorists, rogue agents, threats to national security. Her late husband, Liam, a Green Beret, had taught her how to survive in the wild. But her own mind, her own training, had taught her how to hunt in the jungle of human data. She could see patterns in chaos, find the single dissonant note in a symphony of lies. Looking at Alistair Finch, she didn't see a rich bully. She saw a poorly encrypted network, full of vulnerabilities. His ego was the open port. His temper was the weak password. His cruelty was the malware he broadcasted to the world. And she, Clara, was the ghost in the machine about to bring the whole system crashing down. She gave him a small, tight nod. "Thank you for your generosity, sir," she said, leaving the dollar bill to drown in the spilled wine. "Will there be anything else?" The threat came a week later. It wasn't loud or public. It was quiet, delivered with the chilling precision of a stiletto blade. Alistair had her followed. He discovered her small apartment, the one she could barely afford. He discovered her sister, Chloe, whose experimental treatment for a rare autoimmune disease was costing a fortune Clara didn't have. He cornered her after her shift, his black town car gliding to a halt beside her at the bus stop. The window slid down, revealing his smug face, illuminated by the dashboard lights. Russo stood on the pavement, a silent, menacing statue. "Get in, Clara," Alistair said. It wasn't a request. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice was steady. "I'm waiting for the bus." "The bus doesn't go where we're going," he said, his eyes glinting. "We're going to talk about your future, and your sister's." He knew. The cold dread that washed over her was paralyzing. This was the line. He wasn't just attacking her anymore. He was aiming at the one person she had left to protect. She got in the car. The leather seats smelled of money and menace. "I've been looking into you," Alistair began, as the car pulled silently into traffic. "It's a sad little story. War widow, drowning in debt. And poor Chloe. That treatment she needs. The cost is staggering. It would be a shame if the hospital had to discontinue it due to lack of payment." Clara stared straight ahead, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "What do you want?" "You," he said simply. "I like your spirit, that fire. I want to own it. I want to see it every morning and every night. You will marry me, Clara." She turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief and revulsion. "You're insane. I'm rich," he corrected her, which is a much more useful form of insanity. "Marry me. Be Mrs. Finch. Your sister's medical care will be covered for life. The best doctors, the best facilities. All of it. All you have to do is be mine. A pretty, silent accessory who knows her place." He reached out, his fingers tracing her jawline. She recoiled as if burned. "And if I refuse?" she whispered. His smile vanished. The mask of civility dropped, revealing the predator beneath. "If you refuse, I will buy the debt collection agency that holds your hospital bills. I will buy the pharmaceutical company that manufactures Chloe's medication. I will make sure the supply dries up. I will make sure every door is closed to you. You will watch your sister wither away, and you will know that your pathetic, misplaced pride is the reason. The choice is yours. A golden cage or a grave. The car stopped in front of her apartment building. The ride was over. Her old life was over. He had laid siege to her world, threatening to burn the one thing she held sacred. This was no longer about insults or humiliation. This was a declaration of war. "You'll have my answer tomorrow," she said, her voice a dead, hollow thing. She got out of the car without looking back, the weight of his ultimatum pressing down on her, suffocating her. He thought he had trapped her. He didn't realize he had just unlocked the cage of a far more dangerous creature. The next day, Clara didn't show up for her shift. She didn't call Alistair. Instead, she sold the few pieces of jewelry she had left from her marriage, keeping only the silver locket. She used the money to buy a refurbished laptop, 3 burner phones, and a month's worth of high-speed, untraceable internet access from a shady dealer in a back alley. She set up her new command center in the corner of her tiny living room, the glow of the monitor illuminating her face in the dark. She began with Alistair's public image. He was hosting the annual Finch Foundation Charity Gala, a lavish affair designed to launder his reputation as much as his money. The centerpiece of the gala was the auction of a new city development contract, a project Alistair was poised to win through bribery and intimidation. The deal was worth hundreds of millions. It was his crown jewel. Clara, working for 72 hours straight on caffeine and cold fury, became a phantom. She slipped through firewalls that were supposed to be impenetrable. She navigated the dark web, buying scraps of information, trading in whispers and code. She found the encrypted communication channels Alistair used with his pet city councilman. She couldn't crack the encryption entirely, not yet, but she could analyze the metadata, the timing of the messages, the size of the data packets. A pattern emerged. A flurry of communication always preceded a large, untraceable transfer of cryptocurrency to an offshore account held by the councilman's shell corporation. The final transfer, the one that would seal the development deal, was scheduled for the night of the gala. Clara couldn't stop the transfer, but she could redirect the fallout. She found a different vulnerability. Alistair's primary rival, another ruthless tycoon named Nikolai Petrov. Petrov hated Alistair with a violent passion. Clara crafted an anonymous encrypted email. It contained just 3 pieces of information: the name of the councilman's shell corporation, the exact time of the final bribe transfer, and a single phrase: "The nightingale sings at midnight." It was a code phrase she had seen in the metadata, the signal for the deal's completion. She sent the email to Petrov's most trusted lawyer. She wasn't tipping off the police. That was too clean, too simple. She was planting a bomb in the middle of Alistair's empire and handing the detonator to his worst enemy. The night of the gala was a symphony of opulence and corruption. Alistair stood on stage, a smug smile plastered on his face, his arm around the mayor. He was giving a speech about civic duty and philanthropy. "And it is with great pride," he announced, his voice booming through the ballroom, "that I can confirm my partnership with this great city to build the future, starting with the Phoenix Project." As the crowd erupted in polite applause, Alistair's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, expecting a confirmation message. Instead, his face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks, replaced by a blotchy, furious red. The message was from his banker. "Transfer intercepted. Petrov Corp has filed a hostile takeover bid on the project holdings. Councilman in custody. Nightingale is compromised." The 9-figure deal had not just collapsed. It had been stolen from under his nose, and the explosion had taken out his political pawn with it. He had lost a fortune, and his leverage in a single instant. His facade of charm cracked, revealing the seething rage beneath. He scanned the crowd, his eyes wild, searching for the source of the betrayal. Across the ballroom, a catering assistant was quietly refilling champagne glasses. She looked up and her eyes met his for a fraction of a second. It was Clara. She gave him no smile, no smirk, just a calm, level look that said, "This is only the beginning." A jolt went through Alistair. It couldn't be. The waitress? The thought was so absurd he dismissed it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He had been publicly humiliated, his power questioned in front of the city's elite. And for the first time in a very long time, Alistair Finch felt a sliver of fear. The loss of the Phoenix Project sent Alistair into a paranoid spiral. He tore his organization apart, looking for the rat. Heads rolled, men disappeared. But his obsession kept circling back to the impossible, infuriating thought of the waitress. He put his best men on her, but she had vanished. Her apartment was empty, her digital footprint erased. It was as if she had never existed. But Clara was far from gone. She was deeper underground, operating out of a dingy, windowless room she rented for cash. The midpoint victory had been satisfying, a taste of karma, but it was just a jab. She was hunting for the knockout blow. Alistair's finances were a fortress, his criminal activities shielded by layers of shell corporations and paid-off officials. To get to the core, she needed to get inside. Physically. Her target was Alistair's private office, the penthouse nerve center of his empire. Security was absolute. Biometric scanners, motion sensors, a 24/7 security detail led by the brutish Rousseau. A frontal assault was impossible, so she used the weakest link in any security system, human nature. She spent a week studying the building's cleaning crew, learning their routines, their faces, their schedules. She learned that one of the night shift cleaners, a woman named Maria, had a son with a gambling problem. Using a voice modulator and a spoofed number, Clara called Maria, posing as a loan shark. She terrified the woman, threatening her son, demanding an impossible payment. Then, an hour later, she called back as a different person, a security consultant for Mr. Finch, warning her about a potential threat and telling her a replacement would be covering her shift that night for her own safety. Scared and confused, Maria agreed immediately. Dressed in a cleaner's uniform, her face obscured by a cap and mask, Clara walked right through the front door. She knew the security guards' blind spots, the exact timing of their patrols. She moved like a ghost through the silent, opulent halls. Alistair's office was a monument to his ego, a huge mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a portrait of himself glowering down from the wall. She had 12 minutes. She didn't go for the safe. She went for his computer. It was state-of-the-art, air-gapped from the main network. But it had a charging port. Clara pulled a tiny device from her pocket, no bigger than a thumb drive. It looked like a simple USB-C power adapter, but it was a keylogger and a wireless exfiltration tool she had built herself. She swapped it with the one plugged into the wall. It was a perfect replica. Her heart pounded as she heard the elevator whir. A patrol was early. She ducked into a small service closet, pulling the door shut just as 2 guards swept the room with flashlights. The beams cut through the crack under the door, inches from her feet. She held her breath, every muscle screaming. They moved on. She had the bug in place. Now she needed the final piece. She knew from her research that Alistair's most sensitive information wasn't on any server. He kept it on a single, encrypted hard drive, a ledger of every bribe, every threat, every crime. He called it his testament. He trusted no one with it, keeping it in a hidden safe in his office. But he was paranoid. He often took it with him, transported by his most trusted man, Russo. Clara started tracking Russo. The man was a creature of habit. Every Thursday night, he drove to a secluded warehouse district by the docks. A meeting? A drop-off? She followed him, staying 2 cars behind, melting into traffic. At the docks, she watched from a distance as Russo met with a group of grim-faced men. They exchanged a briefcase. This was bigger than bribery. This was trafficking. People, weapons. She wasn't sure. But the briefcase Russo brought back to the car, that was her target. It had to contain the hard drive. She couldn't take him head-on. She had to be smarter. On his way back, Russo took the same route every time, including a long, dark tunnel under the river. As he entered it, Clara, waiting on an overpass, made a call to one of her burner phones. The call triggered a small, custom-built EMP device she had planted near the tunnel's electrical junction box the night before. The lights in the tunnel flickered and died, plunging it into absolute darkness. The sudden blackout caused a chain reaction of braking cars. In the confusion, Clara, now on a motorcycle, zipped into the tunnel. She wore night vision goggles. To everyone else, it was chaos. To her, it was a perfectly lit stage. She saw Russo's car, stopped. She pulled up alongside it, used a carbide-tipped window punch to shatter the passenger side glass, snatched the briefcase from the seat, and was gone before Russo even had time to draw his weapon. Back in her room, she worked furiously to crack the drive's military-grade encryption. It was a masterpiece of paranoia, but Liam had taught her about the fatal flaw in all human-made systems, the human. People use what they know. She tried Alistair's birthday. Nothing. His mother's name. Nothing. Then she thought back to that first night, to the core of his rotten soul. His cruelty, his sneer. What was he most proud of? His own name, his legacy. She typed in the password, finch.empireeternal. The drive unlocked. The contents were more horrific than she could have imagined. It wasn't just financial crimes. It was a detailed ledger of human trafficking, political assassinations, witness intimidation. He was connected to a network so dark it reached the highest levels of government and industry. This wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a nuclear arsenal. But the evidence was too complex, too vast. If she just dumped it, he would use his army of lawyers to tie it up in court for years, claiming it was faked. She needed him to confess. She needed to use his own voice to sign his death warrant. Alistair, in a desperate attempt to reclaim his image after the Phoenix Project disaster, decided to throw another party. This wasn't for charity, it was for himself. He called it the Visionaries' Gala, a nauseating spectacle of self-congratulation to announce a new, even grander development. He felt untouchable again, believing the storm had passed, that the rat had been purged from his ranks. He was a god remaking his world, and he wanted everyone to watch. For Clara, it was the perfect stage for the final act. She contacted the one person she knew she could trust, Agent Miller, a veteran FBI agent who had been Liam's commanding officer's closest friend. She sent him a small, encrypted packet of the evidence, just enough to prove its authenticity and to get him and his team on board. "I can't just arrest him at a party, Clara," Miller's voice crackled over the secure line. "His lawyers will have him out in an hour. The drive is a gold mine, but we need to place him at the center of the conspiracy. In his own words, I need it airtight." "He'll give you everything you need," Clara promised. "He'll deliver his own indictment. Just have your team ready. And trust me." The plan required an inside man, an ally Alistair would never see. She found him in Antoine, the sommelier from the Empyrean, the one Alistair had insulted on that first night. Clara found him after his shift, a stooped man with tired eyes that held a decade of simmering resentment. She laid out the plan in a quiet cafe, the steam from their cups swirling between them. "Mr. Finch doesn't see people," Antoine told her, his French accent thick with a quiet, cultured disdain. "He sees objects, glasses to be filled or emptied. For 10 years I have served him the finest wines in the world. He has never once looked me in the eye. He has berated me, humiliated me, called me grape squeezer in front of my own staff. He thinks I am a piece of furniture that pours wine." He looked at Clara, and for the first time, a spark of life returned to his weary eyes. "Furniture can be useful. It can hide things. It can listen. Yes, I will help you." The night of the Visionaries' Gala, the grand ballroom, was a sea of jewels and forced smiles. Alistair took to the stage, basking in the spotlight, his arrogance fully restored. He was a king surveying his court, a god about to bestow a miracle upon his city. "Friends, partners, visionaries," he began, his voice echoing with practiced charisma. "They say that after a storm, the sun shines brightest. Some thought a little turbulence a few months ago was a storm. I call it a spring shower. It washed away the weak, the disloyal, and left the strong standing taller than ever." He paused for the sycophantic applause. "Tonight, we don't just look to the future. We build it. The Phoenix Project was a spark. Tonight, I give you an inferno of progress. I give you the Finch Citadel." Behind him, a massive screen lit up with a CGI rendering of a gleaming, gargantuan skyscraper that dwarfed every other building in the city. It was a monument to his ego, cast in steel and glass. "A new world built by my vision for your prosperity," he declared, raising his champagne flute. "To me!" The crowd cheered. At the side of the stage, an AV technician nodded to Antoine, who was standing near the catering station. Antoine returned the nod, his hand steady. An hour earlier, he had approached the technician with a bottle of 61 Chateau Margaux. As he poured the man a glass, he had swapped the USB drive for Alistair's presentation with an identical one from his pocket. As Alistair drank, basking in the glow of his triumph, the screen behind him flickered. The gleaming citadel vanished. It was replaced by a stark, black and white image. It was a scanned page from a ledger, a single line item from the Testament drive. The entry read, "Petrov opposition neutralized. Payment to E. Russo. See Appendix 4B for termination details." The amount was 7 figures, and the name E. Russo was unmistakably a reference to Elena Russo, Russo's mother. A single gasp, then a wave of murmurs rolled through the ballroom. Phones came out, screens lighting up the dim room like fireflies. The press photographers, smelling blood, began snapping pictures of the screen, the flashes like machine gun fire. Alistair didn't notice at first. He was too busy accepting congratulations. Then he saw the faces of his guests, the confusion turning to shock. He turned. He saw the ledger page, his greatest rival's name, and his right-hand man's mother, linked in damning, cryptic black and white. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the stage. The color drained from his face, replaced by a blotchy, apoplectic rage. His eyes, wild and bloodshot, scanned the room and found Russo, standing by the wall, his own face a mask of utter bewilderment. To Alistair's paranoid mind, bewilderment was the perfect mask for guilt. In front of the entire city's elite, he lost control. He stormed off the stage, a beast unleashed, and grabbed Russo by the arm with inhuman strength. "My study! Now! he snarled, dragging his bodyguard through the stunned crowd towards a private room off the main hall. He slammed the heavy oak door behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "You betrayed me!" Alistair roared, his voice shaking with a fury that vibrated through the wood of the door. "Boss, no, it's a setup. Look at it, it's fake. It has to be." Russo pleaded, his face pale with shock and fear. What Alistair didn't know was that Antoine, the sommelier, had been in that room an hour earlier, ostensibly to stock its private bar. He had replaced the elegant fountain pen on the desk with a perfect replica containing a high-fidelity microphone, which was now broadcasting a live feed directly to Agent Miller's surveillance van parked a block away. And for good measure, he'd also discreetly activated the room's smart speaker, routing its audio through the ballroom's own sound system, a feature Alistair himself had installed for grand announcements. A lie? Alistair's voice, amplified and distorted, suddenly boomed from the speakers throughout the ballroom. The crowd fell into a dead, horrified silence. "My mother gave your mother a job when you were nothing. I pulled your family from the gutter, and you sell me out to that snake Petrov? You think I don't know about your meetings?" A sickening thud echoed through the room, followed by a grunt of pain from Russo. "You think he could have built this?" The voice raged, a geyser of confession erupting. "I buried men to lay the foundations of this city. Remember Judge Hemlock? The one who had that convenient heart attack before he could rule against me? His son had a nasty little habit. The photos were my retirement gift to the judge. That was me. I put Senator Ramsey in his seat with a suitcase full of untraceable bonds and a video of his daughter that would ruin him forever. I moved those containers through the docks myself, the ones you were too scared to touch, and you know what was in them. The girls from the East. I did that. Me. And you sell me out for a pittance?" In the van, Miller listened, his face grim. He nodded at his team. "We got it," he said softly. "We got it all." Inside the study, the tirade continued, a catalogue of horrors. Finally, Alistair, his knuckles bloody and his suit dishevelled, threw the door open and stormed back out. The ballroom was a tomb. The guests were statues, their faces pale with shock, staring at the speakers as if they had just broadcast a message from hell. And there, in the center of the room, standing alone in the single spotlight that had been left on the stage, was Clara. She was no longer in a uniform, but a simple black dress. The light caught the silver locket at her throat. Alistair stopped dead. His breath hitched. A low, animalistic growl rumbled in his chest. "You," he whispered, the single word dripping with a year of festering hatred. It was always you, the little mouse in the walls. He strode towards her, his rage a physical force, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea. "What did you do to me?" Clara's voice was calm, yet it carried across the silent room, clear as a bell. "You told me to clean up your mess, Mr. Finch. I'm just a very thorough employee." "You're nothing," he hissed, his face inches from hers, spittle flying from his lips. "I'll ruin you. I'll start with your sister. I'll call the hospital right now." "You can't touch her," Clara interrupted, her voice dropping to a cool, devastating whisper. "Every asset you have is being frozen as we speak." The testament drive was very thorough. It even detailed the charitable donations made from the offshore account that pays for her hospital. That account is now Exhibit A in a federal racketeering case. You paid for her cure, Alistair. Your dark money is going to save her life. In a way, this is all thanks to you. The blood drained from his face. The idea that his own ill-gotten wealth was being used to save the one person he had threatened was an agony beyond comprehension. He snapped. His eyes fell to the locket at her neck. "This," he snarled, his voice cracking with madness. "This pathetic little trinket for your pathetic dead hero." He ripped it from her neck, the delicate chain breaking. "Let's see the face of the man who died for nothing, while his wife plays games. She can't win." He pried it open with his thumb, but he didn't see a picture of Liam. He saw a small, impossibly intricate medal, a blue silk ribbon behind a golden eagle and a 5-pointed star. He stared at it, uncomprehending. It was just a piece of metal to him. Just then, the grand doors of the ballroom burst open. Agent Miller entered, flanked by a dozen armed agents, their movements calm and professional as they parted the sea of shocked socialites. Miller's eyes took in the scene. Alistair, dishevelled and wild-eyed. Clara, poised and resolute. His gaze fell on the object in Alistair's hand. Miller stopped. His professional demeanour dissolved, replaced by something else entirely. A deep, profound reverence. "You are holding the Congressional Medal of Honor," Miller said, his voice clear and sharp, cutting through the silence. "Posthumously awarded to Sergeant Liam Foster for actions above and beyond the call of duty in the face of certain death. Put it down. Now." Alistair looked from the medal to Miller's hardened face, and finally, the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The world tilted on its axis. He hadn't been fighting a waitress. He hadn't been fighting a ghost. He had been fighting a legacy. Miller stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Clara, ignoring Alistair completely, as if he were no longer there. He gently took the medal from Alistair's unresisting fingers. "Ma'am," he said, his voice ringing with a deep, personal respect as he handed it back to her. "Is this man bothering you?" The question was a death sentence cloaked in courtesy. Alistair's hands began to shake uncontrollably. The agents swarmed him then, and the life he knew was over. The click of the handcuffs was the last sound of his empire falling. As they led him away, past the flashing cameras of the press who had suddenly appeared, he caught his reflection in a polished silver champagne bucket, a distorted, broken caricature of a man, defeated by the one person he had refused to see. The downfall of Alistair Finch was total. The Testament drive was a key that unlocked a generation of corruption. His empire was dismantled, his name stripped from buildings like peeling paint. A Victims of Finch fund was established from his seized assets, quietly repairing the damage he had wrought across the city. Months later, Clara sat by a hospital bed in a bright, private room. Chloe was awake, propped up on pillows, the colour vibrant in her cheeks. They were laughing over a silly movie on the television. The doctor had left an hour ago, confirming the news. The treatment was a success. She was in full remission. Agent Miller walked in, holding a small, official-looking box. "These got held up in processing," he said gently. "Liam's personal effects." He handed her the box. Inside, beneath a neatly folded flag, was a letter. A letter Liam had written but never had the chance to send. Her hands trembled as she read it. He wrote about fighting monsters in faraway lands, but how the real war was against the darkness in people's hearts, the cruelty and the greed. The last lines made her tears fall. "They always underestimate the quiet ones. They'll look at you and see a gentle soul, and they won't be wrong, but they'll miss the steel underneath. You were always the smarter one, Clara. You were always the stronger one. You see the patterns they miss? They'll never see you coming. Never forget that." She looked over at Chloe, who had drifted into a peaceful sleep. On the television, a news anchor was giving an update on the Finch trial, detailing how the newly established Victims Fund had fully endowed the children's wing of this very hospital. Clara picked up the remote and turned it off, choosing the quiet peace of the room over the noise of her victory. She held the repaired locket in her hand, the medal nestled safely inside, next to Liam's smiling face. She hadn't acted out of revenge. She had acted out of a duty to honor, a need for justice, and a love for the sister sleeping soundly beside her. She was a widow, a sister, a guardian. She was the quiet storm Alistair Finch had never seen coming, and the city was finally at peace,